Now I'm using a wallpaper sample, and as with most samples, my ends are not even, they're not flat. So the first thing we need to do is get a flat end. So for me, the easiest end to do that with, oops, is this end. I'm going to lay my cutting mat along the edge of the wallpaper at this end, because that's a right angle. Okay. And then I'm going to draw a line up, shift my wallpaper up a bit, and that should give me a straight edge. Okay, and then I'm just going to use a pair of scissors and cut that bottom edge straight. I'm not going to worry about the top edge for now. And put my scissors in there to weigh that down, and a knife down there to weigh that down. It might work better. What I need to do now is to find the centre of my wallpaper. So I'm going to take a nettle tape measure, or you could use a fabric one, it doesn't matter. Mine measures 20 and 1/2 of an inch, so the halfway mark is 10 1/4. And at this point I'm not worrying about the height of the paper, I just want to find the centre. Okay, now I like to go 1.5 inches deep with my paper, so I'm just going to mark 1.5 inches. And I'm going to draw what I call a baseline. You don't have to do this, it's just how I build my page. As I said, every ninny maker that you come across will make their covers slightly different. This is just how I do mine. So this is my baseline, this is my centre line. Okay, so tools you're going to need now is your adhesive. As I said in the bonus video, try to use tape, not wet glue. I don't trust wet glue for this. Whatever you're punching holes with, you'll need that again. Though you could use a pencil or a punch tool, just something you can push through the hole, it doesn't matter. So I am going to put tape on the back of here. These are my tape scissors because they're Teflon, they're non-stick. It's very important to get right up to the edges, to get as close as you can to the edge. I'm actually going to go over the holes, just strengthen them. Ideally what you should be doing is covering the whole of your spine, the whole of your cover with tape. But as I mentioned in the donors video, I don't do that. You do get a better finish if you completely cover it, but it does mean using a massive amount of tape to cover that. It's not so bad on the spine, but when you've got to cover 2 7x7 pieces, that's a massive amount of tape. Probably talking a roll of tape per cover. I'm going to give that a quick burnish. And then remove the red line. Right, this is important. The bottom of your spine needs to line up with your baseline. Your centre of your spine needs to line up with your centre line. So take your time when you're doing this step. That's your spine in. Right, rules for making covers. Do not stick your next piece so that it butts up to your spine. You will not be able to close your cover. Okay, there needs to be a gap, and what I tend to do for me, because I use chipboard, is I will stick 2 pieces of chipboard together. So where I've got my scraps, so these are the 1-inch strips that I cut off earlier. This is a handy tool to keep. Line up the edges. Right, that is the right width for me to have between my pages. So that will now give me the right width, the right gap when I put down my cover. Okay, you can go a bit wider than that if you like. This is that 1/4 inch. Okay, so you want to leave that 1/4 inch gap there. It doesn't actually matter which way I go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cover both of the covers in tape. Make sure you get all around the edges. So I've put my tape down and I've been over it with my bone folder to make sure it's down nice and tight. This has taken just over a roll to do it like this of tape, and this tape is 9mm tape. Okay, now if I'd have completely covered everything on the back, then I reckon I'd have probably have used pretty much all of 2 rolls to do that. It is advisable to completely cover. You get a much better finish. Like I said in the bonus video, you won't be able to feel stripes through your cover, but for some of you, you're going to heavily embellish your cover, so that's not going to be an issue. This is just how I do it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is remove the tape off of one of these. Okay, so again, we need to be careful because we want it to line up along the bottom, and with tape it's hard to, you can't wiggle it around once it's down. So I've got my spacer in place. I'm going to line up with the bottom line. My fingers are stuck. I've lined up with the bottom line and the spacer, and that one's down. See, and I've got my gap here. If you don't leave a big enough gap, what will happen is when you close your book, your cover, you risk this bit splitting. So it's very important that you have that gap, and make it a bit wider if you want to, just to be sure. This is just how I do it. I'm going to put this one in now. So again, I'm using my spacer, carefully lining up with the bottom line. Okay, and the next bit's really easy. I'm going to measure 1.5 inches from the top. Okay, so we've got 1.5 inches at the bottom and 1.5 inches at the top. We're going to do the same on the sides. You don't have to. And that's your cover so far. You can pick it up now and you can see how it will look closed. And there's no tension on that, it's not going to rip because I've left a bit of space. Now we need to mitre the corners, but this is very, very important. Do not cut your paper so it goes right up to that corner there, the corner of your chipboard. If you mitre to there, when you are sticking your paper down, you're going to have gaps at the corners. And to use a knife as I usually do, because I find it easier, and then I can show you. you see how I've left a bit of a gap here? It's very important that you do that when you mitre your corners. So you're going to do all four. Okay, the next thing you want to do is to put a tape along these edges. But don't stick it down yet because there's more taping to be done. The next thing you're going to do is go around the edge, these edges. So you've gone all the way around with the red tape on the edges, and on the wallpaper, and we've gone all the way around on the chipboard. What you might want to do now is go around, pull your wallpaper up and give it a bit of a crease. I do this even if I'm working with DSP or pattern paper. I pull it up. Right, I find it easier to do the long ends first because obviously they're not nice diddly because there's more of the paper to handle. So I'm going to take off all the bottom pieces. I'm going to take off this side piece and this side piece. Okay, I start in the middle, you start where you're comfortable, pull it up, pull it tight, lay it down, and do that all the way along. So you've got a nice crisp finish. Okay. You'll find that you've got a little bit of overlap just here. Push that down with your thumb or a bone folder or the edge of a ruler, whatever you like. You just want to flatten that. Okay, do the same the other end. That little bit of extra there, and you should have that little bit of extra. Just flatten that down. That's why we don't mitre all the way up to the corner, because then now that bit covers that corner of the chipboard and I don't have to worry about that being exposed. I'm going to turn around and I'm going to do the same again. And then I'm going to push down on my corners. Take off the end. You should end up with a really nice finish. Here, so your chipboard doesn't show. You've got a tidy mitered corner here. Okay, and then gently fold that round. And that's how my cover looks on the outside. I was going to decorate this a bit, but I think I like it as it is too much with that glittery finish. So the next thing we need to do is poke some holes. So you can use a pokey tool or a ball tool for this. I'm just going to poke a guide hole through here and here. I'm going to have to feel around with my fingers for the other two. Right. I was a bit silly, I should have marked it after we stuck the first bit down before we turned the pages over. One there, there's one there. And there's one there, and one there. If I turn that over, I can use a ball tool, I can use a pen, whatever you have. And push through. So I've got my holes, I can see where they are. Now at this point I usually get the crocodile back out and put the holes in properly again. So you can see them properly, so that's what I'll do next. And then we'll look at how to do the inside of your cover, because obviously you don't want the chipboard to show. We've now completed all of our pages, we've got them all laced together and beaded if you're beading. We've done the outside of the cover. I've added an extra hole for a tassel, but you don't need to do that, it's just something I wanted on mine. So the next thing we're going to do is to cover the inside. Now it's important that when you do the middle, you don't just stick two pieces of paper together. You can do this using cardstock or DSP, but I'll just show you. If I just stuck two pages together like this, with the movement I'd eventually end up with a little gap, which just looks messy and unprofessional. So what I do is I do three pieces. I do two that cover the sides, and I have one bit that goes through the middle. Okay, this is the one that's going to take the most work, shall we say, once the whole album's together. So as you can see, I've got three pieces because I'm using A4, but even if you use 12 by 12, you'd probably end up needing three pieces for one this size. So we need to go a minimum of an inch onto this side and a minimum of an inch onto this side. So I'm going to cut a piece that is 5 inches by 6.5. Actually, I'm going to make it 6 3/4. Okay, so 5 inches by 6 3/4 I'm going to. Now we need to make sure we've got a strong bond, so I'm going to put some tape here. I'm not going all the way to the top or the bottom because this piece won't fully go to the top, as you can see. And as I said, ideally you want to cover as much as your chipboard in adhesive as possible, just to make sure that the bond with your card or DST and your spine is as strong as possible. And then we're going to put tape on here. So with the tape on here, we're going to go all the way around the outside. And then we're going to remove the tape. You won't have the centre guideline this time, so you need to be careful with your placement. So I need that centred and straight, because once it's down, it's down. And then what I like to do is to gently ease it up using my bone folder across the crease. I'm not pressing down, I'm just putting it along the crease as I fold my page up. And you need to be gentle. So just ease it up. And that's how your centre piece will look.